What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Hey, welcome back to the Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to take a minute to thank the sponsors of the podcast. This podcast is sponsored by TonaLaw. If you're an attorney and you're looking for a trusted partner in New York personal injury referrals, TonaLaw has been doing this since 2001. We're the go-to New York personal injury law firm for attorneys and law firms across the U.S. At TonaLaw, we pay legal fee participation, referring attorneys in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. Refer us a case today and experience the TonaLaw difference. Call us now to discuss how we can work together at 844-TonaLaw or visit us at TonaLaw.com. If you're calling because you heard us on the podcast, just mention Lead Counsel when you make the referral, and they will get you on the phone with me. Succession planning with the experts, Jonathan Hawkins, Daniel Feiman, Ed Alexander. This is episode 2, and we're going to call this one Sushi on an Airplane. I'm going to start it off with a quick story, guys. So I'm flying back from Portugal. I get my dinner put in front of me. I'm an hour into an 8-hour flight, and I'm eating the rubbery chicken. I'm like, I'm not going to eat this. I eat the roll with the butter, and then I see what I think is potatoes, right? And I'm going, you can't screw up potatoes. It's either, it looks like to me, an au gratin strip or like a French fry strip, like just a chunky piece of potato. So I'm like, I'm going to eat that. You can't screw up potato. I bite into it. I eat it in half, and it's sushi. And I spit it into my napkin, and I said, what idiot thought sushi on an airplane was a great idea, where they were like, they're gonna love this, and it was warm sushi. And I became obsessed with that concept of, what do you think is gonna be great? And you know, the flags and signs are all there, but it's like sushi on an airplane, right? So I didn't think it was a good idea, and the genius in the airline that put that on there, I hope the guy got fired. But it's serious. There's always going to be warning signs, right? Recognizing the early warning signs that your firm is in trouble, because you guys deal with all levels of this type of distress, and it does play into the topic that we're talking about. So what warning signs or flags have you seen when somebody comes to you for, oh, by the way, I'd love to sell my practice? What are signs that a firm is actually in trouble and they need to get their house in order before they even think about monetizing it?
I call it the missing middle. So you got these older equity partners, and then you have a bunch of young associates. And if you couple that with one of the equity partners saying that they can't hire any good people anymore, that's a sign there's a serious problem there, because you should have a nice succession. You know, a group that's in their 50s and 60s, a group 30s and 40s, and then the associates below that. And when I say group, I mean a group of owners. The corollary to that is where you have a bunch of equity partners that are in their 50s and 60s, and everybody else is a non-equity partner. So we just call them partners. They're not really partners. And that indicates to me that they haven't really spent a bunch of time trying to develop the bench of the firm. And if you don't have a good bench, you're not going to be able to pass the torch to the next generation.
All right. Well, I like Ed's use of the term bench, because that is the exact same term that we use. You have to identify, you have to create a scalable leadership pipeline, if you will, the bench of who's up next. Look at any sports team that has a catastrophe. You can look at football, soccer, baseball, whatever it is. One of their star players goes down, who's up next? That's what you need also at a law firm. And as Ed has seen, and I'm sure Jonathan and you've also seen, there are plenty of firms where you've got an extremely strong, extremely successful founding senior partner and a vacuum between them and the rest of the firm. That is a huge red flag. So by developing that pipeline early on, identifying who has potential, who wants it, who has capacity, who can step up and you begin to assess them. And then you take them through a development plan, whether that's 6 months or 5 years, to allow them opportunities when they have earned it to move up. So you identify that across the firm, and you can build a simple matrix, which is something that you and I have talked about, of here's all the staff members, here's where they need to be developed, here's the opportunity if they earn it. Nothing is guaranteed. But in spite of what some people say about certain generations not being willing to work or this or that, in reality, in my experience, there are plenty of individuals, regardless of their generational identity, who can step up if they're given the opportunity and are willing to step up. That will take you from the firms that are in trouble to being much better.
Jonathan?
So I had a similar observation that I was going to say. I like to sort of describe it as a Jenga tower. And when you start pulling out those middle blocks, it is precarious and it's inevitable that it's going to fall. I look out at firms here in Atlanta, storied firms that have been here, and I can just go look on their website and know a little bit about them, but know nothing actually from the inside. And I can sort of say, yeah, it's going to be, within a certain amount of time, they're going to be gone. Either they're going to break apart, balkanize, or get sucked into another firm. And another thing that I tell people, definitely for succession planning, you need these levels, but it even can affect the firm way before then because it can hurt recruiting. If you have that missing middle and you want to try to recruit the strong sort of younger partner with a book of business, they're going to look around and be like, yeah, I'm not coming. And then it almost accelerates and becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. So it's not something that you can just ignore and hope to deal with later. In my opinion, you really got to address it all on the way, because if you don't, you almost accelerate the death of the firm.
So I got to ask this question because, all right, let's be very specific. What's the demographic of this missing middle? And then the second part of that question is how do you go about finding that? Like, you can't run an ad and say, I need somebody between the ages of 40 and 45, because there are issues with interviewing. I do the attorney interviews. How do you look? They have to put their birth date down. I get it. But how do you find that missing middle? So let's be very crystallized for me the definition of that team middle player that you're looking for. And are you saying you bring them on as a partner out of the gate? Are you saying you're just looking for that demographic, let them lawyer, teach them the business side? Let's get a little more concrete on that, please.
There's a few pieces to it, right? So I think if I look at it, what I'm looking for is somebody who's probably got 20 years before they're going to think about retiring. So that puts them late 30s, early 40s at the right peak. You also got to look from a lifestyle perspective, right? So if you look at people in their early 30s, they're getting their house, they're having their kids, they're doing things that take up a lot of time. But by the time they've rolled into their mid 40s or maybe early 40s, that has calmed down a little bit, and they can focus a little bit more on developing the book and developing, well, hopefully their skills are there, but really developing into a mentor as much as anything else. And so the way I would look at it is time and grade, right? It's not an easy process. It's not going to be somebody that you can find putting an ad on Indeed or something like that, right? And so, you got to have the personality fit. You got to have everything. The one thing I would say that you don't need would be the business acumen. As long as you have a development process for that business acumen, as long as you're going to show them how to be a good partner.
Okay.
And I'll pick up exactly what Ed is saying. And for those of you that don't know, I'm headquartered in California. California is sometimes a little challenging when it comes to questions you can ask and what you can and can't do with employees, staff, etc. So Tom, a tool that I've shared with you and we've gone through, you can lay out what we call the success profile. Your ideal candidate for any given position within the firm. What education level do they need? What experience level do they need? What competencies do they need? And what personal attributes? Those 4 areas you fill in, and that becomes your ideal candidate. So you don't have to ask how old they are, but if you want someone with 5 to 7 years of experience in litigation, that is automatically going to refine the field. So you create a success profile for each different level of position you have in the organization. That becomes your ideal. Then you go out and look in the marketplace for potential candidates or internal candidates if you've got them. and you match the ideal, the success profile to the individual. You do a gap analysis for what the difference is. That leads you to their individual development plan, which is their career path. That sequence of steps, again, makes it much easier, much more objective, and it turns out it's fairly effective.
Jonathan?
Yeah. So, I mean, these people are hard to find. I'll just say that.
I was just going to say, like, it sounds so good on paper. And then I extend the 5-page offer to a lawyer. And he's like, just how much am I making? How much do I get on production and origination? I'm like, all right, guys, I know I could do this. I know I could do it, Dan. So, Jonathan, go ahead, finish.
Yeah. So the reality is they're hard to find, but they're out there. And so I tell people, I tell my law firm owner friends, this is what I live by now. I call it ABR. Always be recruiting. I'm always out there because you never know who's out there or where you're going to find them. And when you find the A talent, you want to be ready for it. So I'm always looking for it. The other thing I found is my time and timeline and their timeline. It's rare that it exactly aligns. And so you just want to keep, it's like recruiting for a football team. You got to be after these people forever. And then when the opportunity opens, then you jump on it. So that's the first thing I'll say on that is you can get somebody that's at a higher level or you can get somebody lower that you develop. But the key is to find the talent and sort of the cultural fit, personality fit, somebody mentioned a minute ago, and then jump on it when you find it. And then the last thing I'll say is another thing I've seen is, and I'd be curious, Daniel's, what he's seen on this is somebody may come up with a plan and they have the person and they tell them we have a plan, but then the dates that they have told that we're going to do these things come and go. And they're like, oh yeah, we're just going to push that out another year. Mm-hmm. And so they've made these promises and the people that could be there feel like you're lying to me. And then they're like, I don't want to be here anymore. So that's the other element that I'd be curious Ed and Daniel to speak on.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll jump in while you guys formulate the answer to that, but I have gotten really strict on certain things, which is annual reviews, right? Like, so just what you're talking about. People hang on promises, and man, pushing something out a year for a young, full of piss and vinegar associate ready to rock and roll, you are guaranteed they're going to leave. You are guaranteed. You're better off telling them, like, and I've been saying it when I'm interviewing, I will have a succession plan in place by the end of the year. Why? Because I know that I will make myself, even if I have to force Dan to do it every day for 3 months because I waited too long, and Dan will be very mad, but Dan will charge me and Dan will make me pay for that. But, you have to be accountable to people. If you expect accountability, it starts with you being accountable for your word, right?
Yeah, I think that if you set an expectation and then violate that expectation, you've blown the relationship. But if for some reason you set an expectation, I think that you can get an extension, maybe not a year. I don't think a year, but you can get an extension if you're communicative, right? So here's what we're doing to put this in place. I know it's going to go over by a month, by 2 months, but this is why it's going over by 2 months. And here's where we're at. And I'll check back in with you as we go along so you'll know exactly where we are.
All right.
Ed, perfect lead in. That check-in. Tom, you mentioned the annual review. Very important. But that can't be the only conversation regarding the relationship and the growth of the individual. You need periodic check-ins, scheduled, calendared, update check-ins. One of the things you can do in their individual development plan, here's the things that you need to work on in the short, medium, and long term. Here's how they're going to be measured. You and I are going to have this cadence of our conversations. So there are no surprises. If inadvertently they fall behind on their development or something external happens to cause us to have a 3 or a 6 month delay, it won't be a surprise. It's not that people aren't going to be patient. It's they hate surprises. So open up that communication so that you're on the same page. We should be working together.
John?
I agree with all that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, so I'll dovetail into that. One of the things that EOS gets great, and there's all these different systems, is they make you do quarterly conversations. Where I think there's a gap that Dan and I just uncovered. Dan is a guru, so Dan already knew all this stuff. But where EOS really falls short, so they make you form a leadership team, right? And they say, oh, you'll sit in multiple seats as the owner, or if you're the integrator, you'll sit in multiple seats. And so, like, the head of my one vertical, for years, I didn't have a manager, right? So what did I do? I was part-time. Janira was part-time. And I just hired my first manager for that vertical, and the entire game changed. the entire game changed. But it was, which comes first, chicken or the egg? Do you have the revenue to support the manager? You don't hire a manager if it's not supported. So that middle management piece is so important because that's where the communication comes from. That's where the ability to do quarterly conversations with 10 people in a vertical comes from. 7 to 10 people, right? So that's brilliant what you guys are talking about and cannot be overemphasized enough, which is opening up that communication piece, making sure that you are communicating. But I think I've seen more stories like what John said, which is, oh, we're going to push that off a year. Like, in what world is that okay? And no A player who's got the wherewithal to be considered as your successor is waiting around. They're going to literally go home and they're not even looking for a job and they don't have to. The headhunters are calling them, right? Let me ask you guys another question. So right now I'm filling roles for attorneys, right? I have files that need files being handled by an attorney and we're filling out these pods. At some point, do you say, I'm going to have a headhunter go out with my ideal profile for my successor? My successor, I don't need them to be lawyering. It probably has to be a lawyer from a legal standpoint, but do I take that profile and say, I need a, whatever you call the title, to come in? And have you seen people go out to headhunters for these roles to be filled?
Clarification, Tom, are you talking about attorney or are you talking about the COO or CEO for your firm?
Well, interestingly enough, we all know somebody who's a coach of mine, who's a CEO of a firm. He's a lawyer, but he's a coach, and he's been coaching for 25 years, and he's excellent. And this firm did something brilliant. They said, you're going to be a paid fractional CEO, right? Several days a week, he's wearing a CEO hat. He goes in, he does that at the firm. I know somebody else, and Dan knows him, and they had the epiphany of, I need the highest level operator, a COO at my firm right now. And Dan's like, oh, that is succession planning, right? So I guess I answered my own question to a certain extent, which is, for the right salary, you're going to get the operators you need in there. In most law firms, though, even in New York, I don't know if it was you, John, or if it was Jeff Cunningham that said, funnily enough, the big firms, they're allowed to have the title CEO, COO, all this stuff. And it's kind of frowned upon for smaller firms. You know, the money swings a lot of policy. I get it, but you cannot have a operator of a law firm at the CEO level that's not a lawyer, to my knowledge, yet. But have you seen people go out and say, all my lawyers that are lawyering, I'm good. I'm going to hire through a recruiter my replacement, Tom's replacement. Now, I don't know. You give me the clarification. Does it have to be a lawyer or does it not?
Well, I would break it down into two jobs, Tom. From my perspective, right, you're fulfilling a role of a management, right? So CEO, COO, and then you may be doing some legal work. I don't think you do much legal work.
I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah. So, or maybe you're guiding, right? You're strategizing cases and things like that. And when I talk with clients who are looking to do this kind of thing, that's exactly what we try to do. Is how much of your time is devoted to legal strategy or doing legal work, if you still are, and how much is devoted to managing the business and acting as a visionary for the business. And we break those two down. And oftentimes we're trying to do that from a salary overhead perspective when we look at the firm's financial and its performance in that. And so that's really the question I would ask is, if you're doing 100% CEO work, then that's what you're going to go out and hire versus, somebody to do the legal strategy. So you have a chief legal officer and you have a chief operating officer if you're going to fill the CEO role.
Yep. Okay. Dan, John, anything?
Same thing. I think you have probably 3 roles, Tom: CEO, CLO, and then just owner. And so finding somebody to be COO, I could see that being a headhunter type job. Somebody go find that person, because there are COOs at various law firms. Definitely, like you said, at the big ones, you're going to have to pay some big bucks to get them for sure. And
I know. Yeah.
They may not be the kind of experience you want. I mean, you may want somebody that's a little more business oriented that actually comes from outside the law. And so, do you know of any of those? I do not. I would need to go hire somebody to help me find
It's
that.
becoming very, as far as COOs, no, I would be turning to a recruiter for that. But I will tell you that I've been talking a lot about operations because I realize scalability comes from operations. It does not come from lawyering, right? Scalability comes from operations. I want to say that 1/3 time for anybody that's listening to this. Everybody's like, I want to grow a law firm. I want to scale a law firm. And I'm like, you barely have a job. Like, let's not talk about doing a pole vault before you learn to crawl and walk and run. So the scalability comes from operations. And so, yeah, I know you're going to pay big bucks for that. And are you guys seeing a trend, all of you guys seeing a trend where there are more and more COOs coming on? But I'm talking legit COOs. A lot of law firms in the rooms that we're in for Ed and John, these guys are mislabeling people that are in operations. They're taking an office manager like, meet my COO. And right now I have a definitive understanding of what that looks like. And I'm like, how much do you make? I pull the person aside. I said, don't be offended. I talk about money very freely. How much do you make? And they're like, $150. I'm like, in my head, I'm going, okay, you're not a COO. Because the COOs I'm having lunch with now, and I think was I telling you, John, that I started having those lunches?
Yeah.
These guys they're not getting out of bed for 150 grand. Like, it's just not happening, right?
This podcast is sponsored by TonaLaw. Attorneys, are you looking for a trusted partner for your New York personal injury referrals? Since 2001, TonaLaw has been the go-to New York personal injury law firm for attorneys and law firms across the U.S. At TonaLaw, we pay legal fee participation to referring attorneys in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. Refer us a case today and experience the TonaLaw difference. Call us now to discuss how we can work together at 844-TONA-LAW or visit us at TonaLaw.com.
Okay, so I want to ask you guys, have any of you come across people that thought they had a succession plan in place, only to find out they don't really have a succession plan in place? So since you laughed the hardest, Dan, you go first. And then Ed and John, you can jump in.
Every bloody day. The reality is that most firms don't have a strategic plan in place. You talked about scalability. You've got to have a true strategic plan, a 10, 20-year plan if you're going to be scaling. But the same thing with succession. Too many firms that I have come across in the initial conversations have talked about one day we're going to have a succession plan. Well, one day we're going to cure cancer. You can't wish it to happen. But too many firms think that we'll get to that after we do a strategic plan, which is after I retire and buy my island. That's unfortunate.
Ed, you laughing pretty hard too. John, you were laughing pretty hard too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's really two versions of this. The one is the verbal version, which just shocking that lawyers would do that, where they think, oh, well, we've got a handshake deal between us, right? It just makes you want to be sick. But the other one then is they had a shareholders agreement or an operating agreement that contains some buy-sell, and you go in and look at that agreement and you realize, oh, I mean, I'll tell you one that I just looked at a month ago. The buyout provision provided that they would pay them $20,000. This is a multi-million-dollar firm, $20,000 when they died. And so I asked, where did the $20,000 number come from? Oh, well, that's what we put in when we initially started it, and they haven't updated it since then. So, yeah, that's no succession plan right there.
All right, John.
Yeah, a couple things. So most people I see have no plan, and that is a plan still. It's a bad one, but it is a plan. And the others that sort of like what Ed is talking about, I call it the half-baked plan, where they start down the process. Like, for example, I saw one a few years ago. They had a buy-sell. They had it all in there. And they said, we're going to fund it with insurance. And they never got the insurance. So it was sort of there. But when it came time, the person that was going to be there was like, I'm out. So it never happened. So that's what I call the half-baked plan. So there are all versions. I'd say majority have no plan or the verbal plan. Some have gone a little bit further and they have the sort of half-baked plan. And very few go all the way and work with Daniel and get the full primo plan and actually then implement it.
We got to finish cooking this cake, Dan. We got to finish cooking this cake, baking the cake, as they say. Man, you guys are killing me. You know what it is, as the guy who's the client of you guys, it's also overwhelming. There are so many moving pieces, right? I wake up every day with the best of intentions, and there are just so many moving pieces. And I think that as I'm now elevating certain things and getting myself out of even more functions in the day-to-day, I think that what becomes real apparent is when people are like, what do you do all day? This is the stuff I need to be doing, right? Like, I think that I'm 57. I just turned 57. Like, now's the right time when, 10 years ago was probably the best time to do it. So I know where my holes are, even as far as my bench, right? As I'm listening to you guys. So
I've got a question for Daniel, really. So somebody like Tom, I know Tom is like in the middle of growth scale. That's his focus. He is just growing the crap out of his firm, which is awesome. And so that's where his focus is. So how does somebody like Tom, who's focused on that, take the time to focus on the succession plan? What's your advice?
That's what I was asking. Thank you, Jonathan. You're hired.
Jonathan, thank you for clarifying Tom language. What it gets down to is it enough of a priority for Tom to do this? If it's that important to him, then we have to calendar the sessions, whatever cadence works, whether it's twice a week, once a month. And I've got varying schedules with clients, and stick to this. If it's truly an A priority, then you stick to the calendar and you can get this done in a time frame that you're comfortable with. If you say it's an A priority and it's really a C priority, anything that can get in the way will take it off calendar. This isn't that important.
In all fairness to me, because I got to defend myself, just 2 seconds and then we'll wrap up this episode. The last one we had on the calendar, Dan was like, no, you were right for rescheduling. Because I did have a pressing thing that I had to tend to. Dan knew what was going on and he kind of helped me through it anyway, navigate it. But so thank you for that question, Jonathan, because I know there's a lot of people like me listening to this that go, my top 5 priorities every day, financial, marketing, infrastructure, all these different things. And yeah, I think that to Dan's point, I got to set aside certain things and let other people do those things. And now this should be one of my top 3 priorities in a given week or whatever.
I want to weigh in here, Tom, because I want to add one factor in. It's very easy for the lawyers who are listening to this to go and do legal work because they know how to do legal work. But when it comes to succession planning, where you're really a fish out of water, it's really difficult. So what happens when you hit that resistance is you go, I got client work. I'm going to go do client work, right?
Right.
And because that's easy.
Or you go, I love the business side. You're like, I got too much to do to go do.
That's right. I got to go hire somebody.
I'm literally the victim of all the stories. If I don't do it, I'm going to be all those horror stories from episode 1 because I have no reason not to do it. I have every reason to do it. And I'll end up being that guy, and then I'll be the cautionary tale. Like this guy used to talk about it on his podcast. Idiot got hit by a bus. And he was the guy who had all the trusts formed in his estate plan and didn't fund them because my estate lawyer should be on this call too. Fiona Van Dyke out of New Jersey. She would be like, you're an idiot. Like, we did this work for you. We finished it 2 years ago and you wrote a spreadsheet. But I just, part of it is not knowing where to split myself, but there is that other part. I'm super overwhelmed by all of it. And it's way easier to do the stuff I love to do and I know to do in my sweet spot. So,
but the takeaway for listeners really is you're not alone. Everybody is overwhelmed by this.
Right. But the people that do it, man, like I know one of Daniel's clients really well. And like, I love this woman. You know her too, Ed. But I mean, dude, she's happier than she's ever been, but she sat down and she was disciplined about it. So like, all right, Dan, fine. I'm going to stick to his schedule with you.
So one piece of advice, Tom, and I think Daniel will like this one too. Stroke Daniel a big check now and you'll get it done because you're paying for it.
You piss me off. Why you even said that? You pissed me off even saying that. All right, fine. I think I did get his last invoice. I got to get it, make sure I get it. Once it gets paid, you know what? All right. That is a way to get me to move. That is definitely a way. You know me really well, Jonathan.
Jonathan is now in charge of my marketing and collections.
Yeah, everybody out there, if you want to get it done, go pay Daniel. Yeah.
All right. So the next episode next week is going to be what a modern succession plan looks like. Let's get into the nitty gritty. You got to tune in next time. Thank you for coming on, guys. Check the show notes for all the contact information for Ed Alexander, Daniel Feiman, and Jonathan Hawkins. These guys are fantastic. I've consulted with all of them at different times on different things, and they are just really, it's really money well spent every time. So thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Lead Counsel Podcast. Your host, Tom Tona. Go anywhere podcasts are distributed. Follow us. Leave us a 10-star review. Share some episodes with your friends. And thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by TonaLaw. Attorneys, are you looking for a trusted partner for your New York personal injury referrals? Since 2001, TonaLaw has been the go-to New York personal injury law firm for attorneys and law firms across the U.S. At TonaLaw, we pay legal fee participation to referring attorneys in all jurisdictions where it's permitted. Refer us a case today and experience the TonaLaw difference. Call us now to discuss how we can work together at 844-TONA-LAW or visit us at TonaLaw.com.